people that are unfamiliar with this format, this is an interview recorded Twitter Spaces. That is a podcast that helps creators best understand how to best monetize their brand leveraging social media. And we essentially just have a 1 hour to 2 hour discussion, depending on how much time the speaker or the guest has available. Then we could open it up to questions. Generally, if you have any questions throughout the discussion, feel free to DM me specifically, or if you want to post it on a reply to the top tweet that's there, that'll be helpful. And we'll get as many questions answered as possible. But without further ado, James, how are you doing today?
Hey man, it's my first time on Twitter Spaces. If I can be fully transparent, and I felt a little old. I was like, where is he? I've obviously no stranger to social audio, but have no bearings here in the world of spaces. But I'm doing well. I'm sitting here having a little lunch in LA at an undisclosed location. I see Autumn in the audience. She knows my undisclosed location. Yeah, sitting in the corner. So if you hear some music in the background, I'm just trying to grab a little food.
It's all good. It's all fantastic. Just to give people a sense of James's pedigree, he's new to Twitter Spaces, but he's obviously not new to social audio. On Clubhouse, he has a 2.4 million um, uh, people following. He's hosting a variety of different spaces with a variety of different types of people. So I am glad that I'm able to introduce you to the Twitter Spaces community. We're going to have a bunch of people coming in and out, very similar to Clubhouse, and we're going to have a very lively discussion. I have so much to discuss. And to give people some context, we were actually introduced by a fellow friend of ours, Wayne Sutton. We were both part of an Icon summit. We were both on the same panel, which was phenomenal. It was like a few months ago. Looks like I think it was in July, if I'm not mistaken. And then ever since then, we've been trying to coordinate schedules, so I'm glad we were able to make it work today. And so that I respect your time. So do you have an hour, 2 hours? What are what's your schedule open for today?
I'm in the middle of this thing. I'm going to eat this lunch, drive back to my house on the west side of LA. And so as long as you can bear with that, then I'm good for at least 90 minutes.
Perfect. I love it very much. So I wanted to kind of start off with this particular tweet that I sent out. I'm not sure if you had an actual chance to see it. I'm going to put it at the very top, blah, blah, blah. And did you see that the tweet that I posted about your Wall Street Journal article?
Yeah, I do. It's an oldie but a goodie. Yeah.
Yes. So I kind of want to start there. But I want you to kind of give a brief overview for those people that are new to you, new to your brand. Prior to this article coming out, just give people a sense of who is James before possibly working for Columbia and before starting this newsletter. Kind of give an overview of where kind of it all started before this article came out.
Oh, great! Thank you. Well, the article, for context, I think it's 1998. Geez, 99. Oh no, 99.
2000. It was March.
2000?
Yeah, March 3rd, 2000. Yep.
Okay, so that was a pivotal moment in technology. Who was I before that? I was a kid who grew up in the Bay Area. I went to high school in Silicon Valley, went to high school in Palo Alto, across street from Stanford. Was interested in hip hop and culture, and was also playing around in Stanford's library, seeing this thing called the internet. Learning a lot about that in the 80s, mid 80s. Went to UCLA with the idea that I would go become an entertainment lawyer, and ended up dropping out my senior year and went and chased the music business and chased hip hop or relevant hip hop. There was a period of time when many of us, when hip hop was really exploding in the 90s, it was sort of like this gold rush for opportunities of talent, and I was one of the very fortunate, lucky ones that got a job in '95 at Columbia Records, and worked, as a what's called a product manager, so working hand in hand with artists to help them build their brands. I would refer to them as creators today, actually. When I look back at the context of what I was doing, it was really the beginning of the creator economy. And my artists, ended up becoming super popular, super famous. And, I was this John the Baptist of the internet, with my artists and trying to get them to build websites for their brands. And they became Destiny's Child, Fugees, Nas, Lauryn Hill, on and on and on. It's incredible. We were the New York Yankees of the record business at the time. But yeah, my job, and my role, I guess, was a bit of a tech evangelist, when no one was talking about technology. It's probably 96, 97. Primarily coming from a place of really politics, right? Like, I didn't think it was right that the black artists didn't have an understanding of these things called websites. And because I had the fortune of growing up in Palo Alto, most of my high school friends at that point were becoming .com millionaires. And, I was very, I understood the space. So I would say part of what's consistent for me is being an advocate for the creators, especially those who are often off the grid, often shut out, to sort of bridge the gap between technology and creators. And yeah, so I did that at Columbia Records, and while I had boundless energy back then, but during my career at Columbia, everybody kind of had a side hustle, and mine was two things. One, managing DJ Jazzy Jeff, who's my best friend. So I managed Jeff while holding down a full-time job at Columbia. And the other passion I had was I built an email newsletter that was basically a blog, but we just didn't call them blogs back then. And the email newsletter documented the behind the scenes of entertainment, fashion, music, sports. I had the opportunity to be in New York City. Most of my nights out were, nights out with my friends at the NBA or Vibe magazine or, someone who works with a celebrity. And I saw it as an ecosystem. I saw it as a bit of a metaverse of sorts. New York City was like my playground, and I was able to, move in and out of opportunities in New York City in the kind of golden era of hip hop and R&B, which is the mid '90s. And yeah, so I ended up building this newsletter that kind of chronicled. It became 20,000, and I ultimately sold it to a .com called Urban Box Office. And so UBO started with $1 billion capital investment from Nicholas Negroponte, who was the founder of the MIT New Media Lab, and then we went on to grab Fred Wilson, who's an early VC in New York at Flatiron Partners at the time. And I was this guy who left the music industry and joined this brigade. Knew nothing about venture capital or any of these things, but I knew that I wanted to build content. So I ended up building a team. We ended up the company overall was probably 20 employees at the time, and we ended up having 320. We bought a building in Harlem. We ended up raising $40 million of capital. And all my music industry friends were like, what the hell is a .com? What are you doing? You should go work at J Records. And I was like, no, I'm going to chase this opportunity, this moment that we're in right now. So yeah, that article happened while I was building Soul Purpose, which was the newsletter, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. And we were the talk of the media. So it was this moment, this flash moment where everybody was talking about what we were doing. And when I built the newsletter, I built it under a fictitious name. And his name was Andy Platinum. And Andy would write these stories about the industry. And no one knew that Andy was me. And so that article was kind of funny about that article is I did the interview both in my Andy voice, my Humpty Hump voice, and then I did it as James. That writer, by the way, Kemba Dunham, I think she still hates me to this day. Yeah, it was that newsletter. I love when I don't see it very often. I'm glad you found that. It was a moment in '99 when it's like I got the cover of the Wall Street Journal. It's crazy. So yeah, it was great. We ended up raising 40. The founder of the company was an incredible man named George Jackson, who was a filmmaker from Harlem. He did Crush Groove, Jason's Lyric. Was from Harlem, went to Harvard. He really taught me code switching. He really taught me this is how you sort of leverage your blackness and also understand the privilege that you walk in. And it was an incredible moment. He passed away, unfortunately, in the backseat of a New York City taxi cab as we were building the business, and it broke my heart. Crushed me, honestly, if I could be fully transparent. But what we were building at UBO was the beginning of what we probably now are talking about in the creator economy. We essentially went out and bought the rights to Venus and Serena Williams, Muhammad Ali, and we had a collection of creator-led websites that were all stitched together. And then we used our capital to buy a building in Harlem, We were building like a Viacom. The vision was to kind of go into Harlem and kind of inspire, culture. And we define culture as what connects the little white boy in Orange County to the black boy in the Bronx, not by race, but but there was actually a Yankelovich report that was released that talked about the urban mindset. And essentially, we leveraged that white paper and raised, the 40 million on the backs of that kind of the premise that urban culture is not necessarily black or brown. It's the mindset that you have. So anyway, it was an incredible run. It was a moment in my life, moment in time. It's relevant today in that I've been a part of Web 1.0. I've been a part of Web 2.0, and now I'm walking into Web 3.0. And there's certainly similarities and patterns in which I see walking into this Web3 moment that we're in. So yeah.
Yeah, one of the fascinating things, because I went back to your first newsletter that you posted on Substack, and you had this phenomenal quote, which is like, "We were the Geppettos of culture, with each of responsible for items, icons, moments that were driving the voices of urban America," which is a very powerful statement. And when I was reading the story, when I was getting more familiar with your brand a little bit more than we had discussed before, it seems like we talk about this thing called influencers, and we're going to get to your name a little bit later, but it's not a new thing, right? It's just been along for a long time. And in the urban culture, we were influencers from Dapper Dan to the music and everything else. So we've as a culture have always had this level of influence, but we never called it influencer. We just That was the swagger of the time. Um, I'm fascinated from a variety of levels, um, because you are West Coast and a lot of the artists was East Coast, and you had this. You tend to make a lot of bridges that almost are polar opposites. You're managing uh, East Coast artists from the West Coast. You're in music and you're combining that with tech. You're doing the startup stuff. It seems like that was always like, where did you inherently learn that from? Did you have mentors? Like, what was the initial? Because you were doing a lot very early, very quickly, because you were in the article, I think, what, 20 some change, and that was in the year 2000. So what kind of motivated you to move into this, to have that kind of swagger and that side hustle kind of mentality? Who were your influencers at that point in time?
Man, you bring up so many good points. So, quick point of clarification: I was in New York City, working in Manhattan, living in Montclair, New Jersey. Part of the benefits of working in the music business is they bought my house, they moved me to New York. So I was very much New York. I definitely got a hood pass in many boroughs. So I was definitely like a West Coast swagger in New York, definitely. And I managed Jazzy Jeff. I would work a full day in Manhattan, jump on the turnpike, and be in Philly. By the evening. Um, and I love your point about like urban culture has been influential, for a long time. I would go to Puffy's restaurant, Justin's. That was my clubhouse before Clubhouse. Right? Pre-social media, I walked out with two job offers and 5 brand deals. And that's actually where we were doing. That's where we were transacting. That's where we were making moves. Before social media. So I learned really quickly the art of using Manhattan as an island and working all the Manhattan. Even though I worked in the music business, like I lived in Montclair with bankers and authors, and I very much I would say there's a few people who really influenced me. One is a man named Clarence Avant. And Clarence is known as the godfather of black music. I failed to mention, I guess, in my stories, when I was in Palo Alto in high school, I met a guy who would go on to be my best friend. His name is David Elliott, and he's Dionne Warwick's oldest son. And David is a dear friend of mine. But having exposure to David and his family, I kind of became I call it Dionne Warwick, like my second mom.
Wow.
So I actually entered the music business. My first tour was with Houston. That's actually David's cousin. And so I learned about the business from Miss Dionne. And that's why I met gangsters. I met, old record executives. And when I dropped out of my last year at UCLA, I kind of vowed that I would really study the business. It wasn't just like, like I'm influential in LA and I got a job. I understood the relationship between the mafia and the record business. I understood the exploitation of blacks. I understood the powerful relationship between blacks and Jews. I understood the context setting that the business, and I promised my family that when I went to the record business, and I would understand the context in which I'm going into. So I was also a random like mafia historian. So I could tell you like the origins of old Hollywood and how it gets built and all these things. But I'm also like, I'm also a historian of the Black Panther Party. So I really love systems and frameworks. I would say, a lot of this comes by virtue of the fact that my mother, I'm first generation on both sides. My mother was born in Italy to a German Jew and an Italian, and my father's from the Bahamas. And so I'm technically 53% European, of which I'm 25% Ashkenazi. But I grew up with a very conscious, woke white woman, I call it, as a mother who spent time, in the periphery of the Black Panther Party and kind of what was happening in the Bay Area. And, who very much raised me as a black man. He was like, "We're white, you're black. Don't ever get it twisted." But the ethnic and the ambiguity, and certainly the acuity that I have for cultural, comes from the fact that I am the world. And I truly believe that we all are the world. There's so much brotherhood and kinship that I find in connecting with people. So when you're from the Bay Area, which is where I grew up, like good lumpia, you know good Indian food, good pho. Like I'm hella Bay Area, right? I'm from the 70s, 80s Bay, where like we eat each other's food, we live in each other's spaces and places. So I can go to Brazil and Tudo Bang at the best of them. I go to Dubai and Yala Habibi. Like I'm in these worlds because I genuinely take the time to get to understand culture at a very deep level. So yeah, I took all of that into these businesses that I went into. Certainly Clarence Amont, who I mentioned was known as the Black Godfather, was I would say my first really inspirational mentor. He became chairman of our board at the .com. But Clarence's story, which is well documented in a documentary on Netflix, which is called The Black Godfather, I highly recommend you guys watch that. He's a black man who came to LA in the 60s and worked for a contemporary of the mob. And contemporary of Al Capone, and came to LA and managed white artists, and built an incredible career representing the creator economy of that moment. And essentially, he went on to be a big political fundraiser for Jimmy Carter, for Clinton, for Obama, and I would say many of the moves I'm making are pattern matching Clarence. I do a lot of work in working within politics and government. So I understand the levers of influence. I think because of men like Clarence Amont, who helped me understand the relationship between politics and culture. There's a man named LeBaron Taylor when I went to Sony, who was the chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus work that we were doing in between Sony Music and DC. So I spent a lot of time going to Congressional Black Caucus and spending time, with politicians, and we leveraged what we had, right? He had Michael Jackson, we had, I had all these artists, so I understood how to leverage Hollywood, to kind of, gain access to, to the political world. And that came through LeBaron Taylor, God rest his soul. He was a great man as well. And then certainly George Jackson, who I mentioned, was one of the founders of UBO, Urban Box Office. He went to Harvard. He was a filmmaker, and he just moved through culture with such ease and such grace. That it was just amazing. And then I actually be nothing without the women in my life. There's so many to name, but there's a woman named Vivian Chu who's an executive at Sony, signed Patra, Shabba Ranks, and she's taught me just how to move with gangsters. You know what I'm saying? When you work in the record business, you gotta learn, especially in hip hop in the '90s. You know what I mean? Like I had to move with the bad boys. You know what I mean? And you have to show up for work in a suit at 550 Madison Avenue, and you have to also understand how to move in the streets. So I love that she gave me that ability to sort of understand. I'm equally as relevant in the Harvard Club as I am Harlem. When I go to Rio, I go to favelas. Like I'm not scared of like my people, my culture, and I move that way with a lot of fluidity around the world. And so I would say those are the beginning pioneers. I continue to be inspired. Honestly, I get on Clubhouse, and it might be an 18-year-old VR programmer that inspires me. I feel like I'm turned on, right? I'm intellectually curious. I am turned on all the time, and driven by smart people, and that's what I've built. I built a community of people that inspire me, and I'm always a student. I worked with my second career was building a social media agency, and I worked with Jane Fonda, who's my first client, and I was always struck by how curious Jane Fonda is, like how turned on she is by life, and I've taken a lot. And Jane Fonda would say would be another mentor of mine, and someone who I learned a lot from.
So the highlight here is just the the curiosity, the dedication to the craft, the history, all those critical components that are traits of success, regardless of any profession that you decide to go down. As a creator, sometimes we neglect the art form in effort to be so eager to create ourselves. And I think that because you have and you were surrounded by the legacy, the legends that give you and your quest to understand the history of how people got together and the origins, it becomes you became much more impactful in becoming a legend yourself because you were surrounded by these legends. So inherently, you would also become one of these individuals. And I think for creators in the space and the creators that listen to this later, take that into consideration. Understand the craft. Make sure you understand the inner workings. One of the things that's often not discussed in these types of forums is the concept of code switching, the ability um, to accommodate for your environment, which I think is vital. For myself, I grew up in a town called Lawrence, Mass, and later on, I realized that there was 100 countries represented in the town that I was from. It was an immigrant town. That ability to interact with people from different cultures and backgrounds has served me extremely well to this day. As I enter these spaces and these audio spaces, like we both have been doing, being able to understand and connect with almost everyone in the space and finding one similarity because we have so well versed is a vital trait as a creator. So, as creators, start thinking about what James is saying and how you could apply it to yourself, and really understand that the more you dedicate, the higher financial return you're going to get because you'll have these similarities. In those cases, when he was growing up, it was very much a life or death situation if he wasn't able to understand how the mob moved, because that was part of the music industry. And if he moved the incorrect way, things probably wouldn't have turned out the way they turned out. But because he understood the culture, he understood that's the way it worked. He understood how to politic in that kind of arena. The longevity of his career is a direct reflection of his studying of the culture. Um, what is your, am I, did I catch everything correctly in your opinion?
Yeah, I'm using my community.com to text out to all my followers. I'm on here. I forgot to do that.
Oh, no. Yeah.
No, yeah, I wanted to say you nailed it, man. It's like you find that one thing that is the thread that connects you. Funny, I have sort of reinvented or built out a new IP as a DJ. I see a few people who are in my DJ sets a lot. Autumn would be one of them. Mafalda. There's some people listening, and I built this sort of. I kind of got bored with Clubhouse, to be honest with you.
Right.
And so I wanted to come back and like play around, but not like just be on stages talking about things. So I ended up becoming a DJ. And it's kind of interesting. I mean, I've been DJing for a decade. But when I had a birthday, 51st birthday, and one of my friends owns a restaurant in Malibu, and he was like, get everybody some rich cacao. I found my DJ name. This is Baller, right? This is like my Baller alter ego. And so just like Andy Platinum, I created a new character named DJ Rich Cacao. And here's the punchline. I DJ in probably 7 different languages, from Farsi to Arabic to Patois, Jamaican Patois, right? To all the Hector Lavoe records I'm doing. My music knowledge is definitely unparalleled, right? I know music really well. I know how to DJ, but I also use the music as proxy to get to know communities. So this weekend I DJed in the Persian room for all the Iranians. I'm DJing in the Arabic room this week because that's actually how I move around the world, right? When I go, and I did start DJing in real life. When I'm in Dubai, like I basically go. I used to DJ for this like advertising agency, and by the way, I would give speeches about social media and beg them to let me DJ. They were like, "Mr. Andrews, we just need you to talk about social media." I'm like, "No, I'm nice as fuck on the fucking ones and twos. You should let me DJ." And I would like beg them to let me DJ, and then I would destroy it. They'd be like, "Oh shit, he really is a DJ." Yeah. So I forced my way into DJing. I'm the biggest DJ in Clubhouse right now, and I literally did this as one because I think it's amazing and fun, and I love building brands. But the other thing is honestly is I really love exploring culture. So like last night I DJed for 3 hours. I do like sets that go from between 1 hour and 6 hours. Wow. And I'll just zone out. And it's a force function that makes me dive into other parts of the world and understand their culture through their music. And to your point about having that one thing, my one thing has always been when I land, I find the DJ. I'm in Tel Aviv, I'm looking for the DJ. Wherever I am, right, I'm always looking for the DJ. And so I just became the DJ. And the second part that I think is important is, I see, I've been someone who hosts dinners and gatherings, and, I see the evolution of a new persona, a new archetype, which is what I call the salonier, right? The person who is what you are, right? Who can host and gather in spaces and places, and we can do that digitally, and then we can do that in online. And so, so I see the evolution of my brand being a bit like a salonier of the great salon cultures of France, right? There'd be these amazing women who would bring together politicians and artisans and authors and writers. That's a skill set that I have. I've been doing it pretty well for the last 20 years. And I'm really comfortable in being a global, nomadic kind of gatherer of people. Now, my business, by the way, is in venture capital, and I work in all kinds of. I'm not a DJ, not my profession, but it's been great to kind of swim in and out of these lanes because we're really dealing with a mycelium network right now. We start talking about the metaverse and Web3. Right. There's so many lanes to get into, and stuff. I can do that through the lens of music. That's my door. There's a whole crop of people who think I'm just a DJ in Clubhouse, and I fucking love it. I actually really love it because I'm like a surprise and delight. I'm not someone who has to overly brag on what I do. I just, if you know me, you know me. If we get to know each other, great. And so anyway, hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, indeed. And you didn't know this. However, I like to keep the family-friendly language, if at all possible. Sorry. All right, no worries. You're a DJ. That's the life. New York, I get it. I just wanted to. It's. I drop F-bombs every once in a while. Yeah, no, it's. I will stop. No, it's all good. I appreciate that. And one of the interesting components is this: the music is the great uniter, right? Because as you mentioned, you got the Farsi, you got the Arabic, you got the various cultures that really unites us. Music and rhythms and it hits us at a visceral level, and the ability to move a crowd, the ability to know how to transition from one song to another to change the sentiment of the room is very powerful. And to also do this not only with music but with words and with storytelling is also very vital. So for those people that might be thinking, oh, I'm not a DJ, no, look, it's a storytelling. As a creator, you're telling stories with your craft, whether it be verbal with these audio rooms, whether it's be visual with like NFTs and arts and all those types of things, even with writing books. There's a variety of different ways to connect with people, and being very sensitive to even words, which is what I'm just mentioned regarding keeping it family friendly. I think that find out what your community, who you want to serve, what they're all about. I use the word serve with many entendres, because you could serve them music, you could serve them food. We talked about assemblée. So it's being a servant to that community and really catering to that. And I love the whole fact of find me the DJ, because that DJ knows how people are feeling. They know the sentiment in the area, because when they throw something on, when they put something on, they're gonna elicit a response, and they know this response because they communicate with people. They're gonna let that community is gonna let them know what they're feeling. And most music is representative of an emotion, and most emotion, the most emotional the person is, the better the art form. I know that, like, my best poetry comes when I'm upset with my significant other, right? Like when I get to a dispute, that's when all the great rhymes come out. I don't know what it is. It's almost like Andre 3000 talked about the same type of thing. Um, if you're having a happy day, there's no good art that's coming from that. Maybe like something along the lines of Ice Cube, and you had a good day. But other than that, most of the music comes from a very visceral reaction, and the more we get in tune with that, the better it is. So yes.
I once, sorry, you said something. I hope you don't mind.
Oh no, go ahead. This is free flowing.
No, it's good. Okay, cool. I'm somewhat friendly with Pharrell's camp, and my son's a classically trained violinist. He was gonna drop out of music school, and so I set up a meeting with Pharrell. And it's funny you say that because it's exactly he spent 4 hours with my son, and that was exactly the advice. He was like, from the pain comes the art, comes comes the creativity. And it's interesting that you say that. Honestly, I've been going through some challenges in my family, and and just some other things that have been happening this summer. To me, I think and move like an artist. Like when I'm writing business plans, sometimes it's the same process that I would go through when I was with Jazzy Jeff, and poetry would come down to work in the studio. Like we go get a cheesesteak, you know what I mean? You go and talk about relationships.
Right.
We would like talk about things. Like I actually write like and process like business ideas in the same way a creative like comes up with a new like
Hook.
art.
Yeah.
And so I love that you weave that in. I didn't know you were a poet either, by the way. I've been a little bit of a hack poet myself, and I gotta say that like writing poetry has been. Thank you so much. And I'm good. I'm done. Writing poetry, DJing, it's like tapping into a well of creativity that is just really vital for for having the mental capacity to come up with with new ideas and innovative ideas. If you don't tap into that creative well, it's really hard to access what we need for this new moment that we're in. I see Catherine Connors, my partner, as she would call it, a kairotic moment. We're in a kairos moment right now, and in order to tap into the wellspring of opportunities that come our way, the innovation is going to take to move NFT from phase one to phase 1.5. The ability to think about the metaverse in something that's beyond Ready Player One. We have to use our imagination. So much of my time is spent imagining and living in the imagination zone, thinking like more like Walt Disney, right? And thinking like that. And thank God I have Roy Disney's around me, so I can be Walt.
Yeah, and it's often neglected. I mean, a lot of when we're dealing with NFTs in particular, I'm starting to get more involved with that. That's such a supportive community. In no time in our history, I don't. I'm most certain that it's interesting how the artist is now becoming the curator at the same time. They're supporting other artists. And now we're changing the paradigm of being the broke artist to being the very influential artist that is causing ripples and changes around the world. This is just the beginning of the 3.0 movement of the web, and this cryptocurrency has really put a wrinkle in our history for a positive sense. The more I get a sense, the more I get involved with it. So to kind of summarize it again for those people that just joined, my name is Jose Limane. I host a Monetize Monday, and this whole discussion is a recorded discussion. It's a podcast that is geared to helping creators best monetize their brands, and I highlight and I bring every week a new guest to talk about their experiences and how you could best leverage their experience to monetize your brand. Today, we're speaking with James, who has a long history of music, entertainment, now, as well as startups and how to get to the point of if you want to seek funding, this is what he's all about. But one of the key components, ironically enough, I said that deliberately, is his name is Key Influencer. And in the article that you see, the second post that I've have there is a Wall Street Journal post from March 8th of 2000, where he talks about, or what the article talks about, a newsletter that he put together. Now, because it was 2000. Uh, it was AOL. He was scraping emails from AOL, and he grew that to a very phenomenal rate. And that newsletter was extremely influential. One of the key components is, if you read the headline, its sole purpose was the name of the newsletter, and it boasts careers by just mentioning names. And I would encourage everyone to kind of read that, get a sense of the history, and what used to happen then is happening now. And the newsletter was so phenomenal that just by mentioning someone was looking at another position caused them to actually get raises, and get more interest within their own company, which was very vital, especially for the urban community, because obviously there was a lot of challenges, and still a lot of challenges, being a person of color, and sometimes we're neglected. So by being mentioned in this newsletter, they got that extra boost of kind of credibility, and a lot of people got increases in salaries and better positions and things of that nature. So I mentioned the newsletter because Twitter has a review newsletter that's for free that everybody could add to their profile and start doing the same thing that James did back 20 years ago. Fundamentally, the art hasn't changed. Just focus on your craft, develop a community, and go from there. So I want to get to the name key influencer. What was the origin of that? Why did you decide on that Twitter handle and that social name? Um, what was it about that made you kind of compelled to select that name?
I don't know. I've always seen my work as like influencing the influencers.
Mm-hmm. We're losing you for just a second. So if you could just, yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah, we got you. Yeah, we hear you still.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Sorry, I had to get in the car.
No worries.
So bear with me. It's got a 20-minute drive.
No, no worries.
Life in LA.
Yes.
So yeah, I've always felt like this sort of like this role of like influencing, influential people.
Mm-hmm.
My Bluetooth. Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Okay. So yeah, I've always sort of assumed this role of like influencing people who I knew had cultural influence. And like I said, I always thought of like my world as like being Geppetto, like making the toys that the world plays with. And I took it on. It's a bit bold and brash, but it's also it's who I am. I'm authentic in that there's receipts, right? There's no lies told. I do, there's a history of doing this. And when Twitter launched, I had been doing this for a number of years. It just felt like that's what I want. I don't remember the entire day but I got on Twitter so early. I don't even remember what that day looked like. But I did feel like the key influencer brand felt like a good fit, and I felt like I could draw attention, but then build a mythology around being a key influencer and what that really means. And I think at the time when I chose the name, I felt like this was in the beginning of like talking about influence, and we didn't have influencers back then. They certainly weren't called that. We had the influencers, but we didn't call them influencers. And so I took that name because it sort of best defined how to articulate, I think, the value at that time for me.
Yeah, and it's funny how now that word has a stigmatism to it, which is people are trying to move away from, which is interesting in and of itself. So let's talk about that transition. So we have the newsletter. For those people that didn't get a chance to review it, I pinned it to the top. It's the second pinned tweet. Is a Wall Street Journal article that was talking about the sole purpose newsletter, so you can read all about that. It's a link directly to the Wall Street Journal article. And for those that also came late, we started talking about influencing, who influenced James, and one of the influencers was Clarence Avant, who has a Netflix documentary about him called The Black Godfather. So that's also the last tweet that I pinned to the top there. So let's talk about this new evolution. Let's talk about more the current situation. When did you join Clubhouse and this whole social audio movement? Um, was it like, and did you catch it like immediately? Did it take you a while to get accustomed to it? I know you're new to Twitter Spaces, and this is one of your first Twitter Spaces. So, what was it about this particular medium that you felt like you wanted to really invest a lot of time in? With 2.4 million followers on there, obviously you invested a lot of time there. So what was it that compelled you to say, "Wow, this is really something"?
So, I moved back to Los Angeles about 5 years ago, originally to partner with my then partner, Troy Carter, who was managing Lady Gaga, to build a venture studio. We were backed by Havas Advertising, and it seemed like a good idea. My business before that was an advertising agency that I built after spending some years at Omnicom and building out social media practice within Omnicom. And so this third act in my career, was really about understanding venture and leveraging access to culture. And so a lot of my time was spent organizing, different people in various ways. We were raising a seed fund, like $25 million seed stage fund, and we were also advising companies. And so I was doing a lot of gathering of community in cities. And when the pandemic hit, I naturally, I've been playing in the internet for a long time. I just started organizing Jeffersonian dinners. I was known for my 8 to 12 person dinners, and so I just brought that same energy into the internet. And I ended up, Nate Jones from Andreessen called and was like, "Hey, we're about to put some money in this platform. You'd be perfect for it. You should bring some of your folks into the platform." And so that's how I got introduced to it. Was from the very beginning. So I was there, when things were just starting out. There weren't millions of people. And I just took the same energy that I was doing in March and April. I think I joined in May. So I've done like 60 days of like my own dinners and, equivalent of Zoom. I was doing a lot. I had my own community. The Authenticated was built probably 4 years ago.
Mm.
I built it in WhatsApp and Slack, so similar to what people are doing in Discord now.
Right.
I built one of those 4 years ago as a way to kind of organize my global network. So I wanted to have in the same space, creators in Dubai with investors in London and homeboys in Oakland, whatever. And so, and I like that. That's kind of the world I live in. And so. So I brought the Authenticated was this sort of thing that is sitting there. We kind of playing around in Mighty Networks and built like a membership community, and we're just trying to figure out the model for community.
Mm.
So Stephanie, who's at Clubhouse, ends up joining. She's my friend in real life, Steph Simon, and she was like, you should really bring Authenticated into Clubhouse. And I was like, And so as they started forming clubs, I was like, okay, I'll do it, fine. And so, I brought Authenticated into Clubhouse, and we ended up, producing a lot of the same dinners and content that I would do in real life, just doing it in Clubhouse. And everybody was home, and I was home, and my community is not just diverse geographically, but the types of things that we are interested in range from agriculture to venture capital to NFTs to sex to death to time. I mean, it's an Alexandria library of interest. And that's who I am. I'm curious, right? And I'm curious about culture. I'm curious about humanity. And so I was able to use Clubhouse as a place to learn more, to find out more, to meet people like Catherine, who's in the audience, and meet incredible people. And it just kind of happened like that, and for me, it also felt like the Wild Wild West. It felt like, as it does now, it felt like hip hop. It felt like, okay, here's this moment. There are no damn rules. Let's go. Let's just create our rule. Let's create new norms. Let's create new terms for things. Let's create, let's build new rock stars. I love platform rock stars. I love I mean, I've been, I've been in Periscope when it first started. For shits and giggles, one time when Periscope first launched, I spent like 30 days and became like top 100 on Periscope because I wanted to feel what it felt like to be top 100. I was like, what does it mean to be top 100 in Periscope? So I was like one of the top people for a while. I couldn't sustain it, but it was just like, what does that really mean? And so when Clubhouse hit, it just was a natural evolution. Things just started happening. I mean, it was, certainly a combination of things I think led to the moment. It was the content I was producing, it was the algorithm and the friendliness of the algorithm. I mean, and it was consistency, I think, in delivering good content. And then I also brought in, probably in the beginning, I brought my entire network into Clubhouse. So there certainly was a commitment that I made to Clubhouse. There was certainly, and there continues to be a commitment that I make to Clubhouse as an investment. It's probably why I am so awkward on this Twitter Spaces. It's because I really, and to be honest with you, I've burned out probably 3 times. I'm in my 3rd wave of coming back to Clubhouse, and so the DJing part is really it's restorative and healing for me because like I have a mission in life that's bigger than just like talking on the stages, which it's fine. There's a lot of people that spend a lot of time doing that, but like if I don't fund the businesses that I want to fund, if I don't find the founder who's off the grid, the non-traditional founders, in not just America, by the way, in Colombia, Bogota, and Jamaica, and London. Like my mission is way bigger than just the part of like having followers. If I'm not working on that every day, then I look at Clubhouse as a wonderful way to build audience. It is not the community that I have; it's the audience that I've built, and I think there's a distinct difference between audience building and community building, and it's certainly been great. But I look at my world as concentric circles, right? So there's the outside of the layer, and then the closer you get to the Tootsie Pop is where the value is. And so Clubhouse is a great outer ring in my concentric circles.
Yeah, and the critical component there is that the audience and community. Community is so vital for so many reasons. And community is just like if you think of your local community, where you live, where you buy, where you invest your time in. I think that people often want to just um, amass a number and disassociate with the humanity of what the number represents, right? So when I do say 2.4 million, it's like, wow, what's going on? But those are you worked hard at cultivating that community by engaging in communicating with the vast majority of them over time, right? And then because of the authenticity, because of the content you created, because of the vibes and the feeling that you've elicited those individuals, it became a snowball effect, and as a creator, and I always want to get back to the creator of what are the lessons learned here and what could you extract from the speakers is look at the community that you want to build. There, James was just talking about like he was just focused on building the community the best possible way. It just so happened that this Clubhouse thing just came about. He was already going to do something regardless of whether it came out, and sometimes being at the right place at the right time, but being committed to your craft and having that dedication when no followers are happening, is going to be instrumental when you do have the following. um so it's something that
and too, you know this too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, yeah. Delay. No, I was gonna say there's also something about like doing it when no one's watching and doing it in spite of people going, "What are you doing?" Like, trust me, when I first was on Clubhouse, people were like, "What? What is that? Like another platform? Oh my God!" You know what I mean? Like, and I just every day, built. I built. Whether you understood it or not, I could see. First of all, I knew the capital, behind it, right? So I knew Andreessen. I know what they're capable of, and I could just see where the pandemic was taking us. People were like, "Oh, it's going to be over." Nope, it's not going to be over. You're going to be in these digital venues for a long ass time, so you better get used to it. Sorry, I didn't mean to curse. Sorry.
Oh, no, I get it.
I think like I would imagine you're the same way. Like when you can see down the field a little bit and see where the hockey puck is going, sometimes you're building in the dark and like nobody believes in you. And honestly, I've done this. I've been building in the internet when people were like, "What do you do?" Like, what is that? And so I'm very comfortable. Actually, I'm more comfortable when your eyes are glazed over and you're like, James, I have no idea what you're talking about. And that's never been my problem. Is being, I've always lived in the future, but I think the opportunity now is how do we build the right story and narrative around this moment so that people understand it. I was in a room last night, the Black Metaverse room, so fascinating, and someone asked, well, I'm talking to my people. She was from Long Beach, she's from the West Side, and she was like, none of my people really understand NFTs, and they think it's like, it's a hustle.
It's a scam.
And it's like, and she was trying to explain how Black people in our community, sometimes are going to jump on things late,
right?
Because they don't understand it. And I'm
right.
like, I've always lived in that. Whether they're Black people, white people, whatever people I've always had to convince the curmudgeons,
right?
The people on the sidelines.
Yeah.
And when you've been doing that your whole career, you just get like really good at like understanding what's important is the narrative and the mythology around what we do. And because I came up through hip hop, I will always be indebted to hip hop as a framework for what we're in right now. We are in a moment that feels like hip hop. What was exciting about hip hop was that if not for technology, and by the way, I see another one of my mentors in the audience who was my boss, Temek Gidry. He's listening right now. A lot of legends been coming in and out of this room, by the way.
I love it.
So yeah, like one of the things I learned from great people like Temek, the folks I worked with in the music business, is hip hop is like a platform, right? And if you think about technology and hip hop, it's the original lean startup. Right? We took, we had to take, we took folks from Jamaica and DR and PR, and they came to the Bronx, and they had to find the red and green wires at the blockchain.
Right.
Those folks that came from the projects were our first engineers.
Yeah.
As much as I grew up in Palo Alto around all these fancy folk who, I wrote code in 8th grade. I grew up writing code in junior high, right? And but everything I know about technology comes from, I would say, 4 horsemen. It's DJ Jazzy Jeff. It's Eddie F, who was Heavy D's producer, computer science major.
Yes.
It's D Nice, who was our web developer.
Wow.
Yeah, D Nice was a web developer in between being a rapper and then who you know him today. And then Daddy O from Stetsasonic.
What? Oh my God.
Daddy O knows more about mobile technology than anybody I know. And you have to understand this. In the 90s, when every executive had, computers and they would use them, right? These guys were using computers to make beats.
Yeah.
So, like, Jazzy Jeff and most of these producers, they're the ones that had access to technology, and they're engineers. That's why Dr. Dre, built Beats by Dre. He's an engineer. You put them in a different context. You take them out of South Central, take them out of Compton, you put them at Georgia Tech, and they're engineers. So the way that I contextualize hip hop is actually through the lens of a technology breakthrough. It has so much science and technology in hip hop. Listen, even the sound. One last thing.
Yeah.
On this. If you think about sonically, right?
Right.
New York records were like muffled and gritty and sounded like you were meant to listen to them in a Walkman.
Right.
Dating myself, right?
Right.
But West Coast records were like tuned and engineered differently. They were engineered like R&B records. That's why Dr. Dre and the Chronic were such an important release at that time, because that was like an R&B record, and the way they engineered it and mixed it, it sounded different in your car, because I'm from the West Coast, and we drive in cars and play music that bump. Y'all don't play music in cars. You walk around with Walkmans and big boots and big jackets.
Right.
No disrespect.
It's nobody. No. I completely agree, because New Yorkers don't have cars, and you guys have long drives all over the place, and your cars are bouncing, so you need some music to make the car bounce.
Right. So Dr. Dre and those guys made music for our generation on West Coast, because we grew up on the Parliament, on Zap, on all this stuff, which when you're driving down the street, like I would know records are popping in Oakland at the barbershop because I would
The
be in my
music.
barber chair and
Yeah.
I would hear boom, ba boom, ba. I was like, oh, new Too Short record, up, new this record, because I could tell music by the bass lines, because I could hear it in the community. I could hear it going down the street. So we on the West Coast design music differently through a different scientific process. That's, by the way, that all happens in the mix. That all happens in
Right.
the engineering session, in the mastering session. When you're finishing an album, you're going to tweak the IQ up. You're going to tweak the bass. You're going to tweak the highs and the lows and the mids. All that happens in that. So when you're seeing like someone like DJ Quick,
Oh
like when
man.
people like that, these guys are like scientists. That's Dr. Dre is a scientist, and that's why when Jimmy Iovine was like, "Yo, I'm going to build this business," he built it with Dr. Dre because he's a sound snob.
Yeah.
He's a sound snob. So
Oh yeah.
I reference our culture. It's so important to note because within it is embedded technology. In it is embedded creators and engineers, and we have to tell that narrative to our communities so that they start to look at and frame themselves differently. Now, the story is different today. The story I'm telling a 12-year-old in South Central is, yeah, you may play Fortnite. That could take you to a whole new career in data and analytics.
Right.
But the same opportunity to reframe the story and put it in a package that folks in the hood will understand exists today. And I'm not going to rest until my people understand this economic opportunity and this industrial revolution that we're under right now.
And it's a crazy scenario because we both come from technology. I remember I was in the boys club, and there was a TRS-80 Tandy Radio Shack computer, and I had to learn how to program using this turtle kind of software thing, right? Turtle up, move down, and and I almost got locked in because into the boys club because I was just there by myself and they forgot I was there anyway. So, but people don't realize that if it wasn't for technology, there was no hip hop because you have to connect all these wires and you had to be familiar with patterns. These patterns aren't for, robots, they're for the human soul. The heartbeat
Yes.
is the rhythm, and
That's
we're
right.
we're making music. And to think how analog and digital we were at the time, to and it just came so natural to us, right? We then go to the archives and look at the James Brown, the Funkadelics, all this music that was there, and we're giving it a whole nother life to a whole another generation, to the point where people are listening to it now and listening to a remix, and they just think it's like this modern day artist. But the foundation is these artists from the 70s that were creating this, and we were mixing it, and it's phenomenal. I love the connection between the technology that's often neglected because it seems like we're always behind in the technology. But then we look fast forward to this day, and we are the, using your name, the key influencers on Instagram, the key influencers on Twitter, because what we say as the culture becomes leveraged. A lot of the slang, things on fleek, all this terminology comes from the community, right? The dances now on TikTok comes from the community that are just co-opted, right? And being able to recognize that, and even these dances end up in Fortnite, right? Like, we're creating this in our bedroom, and now it's distributed globally and now part of the metaverse. And I think, again, going back to the creator, it's important to understand the history of certain things. In order to become influential, you need to be influenced by the creators that came before you, to acknowledge them, and to almost take from those individuals that have influenced you, pay homage to them, incorporate that into your craft. Whether you're a writer, a musician, or an artist, or whatever it is, there's people that came before you that paved the way for you to do what you're doing. So I love the fact that all these types of things are all integrated together. Mm-hmm. Go ahead. Oh, we're losing you. We're losing you. Hold on.
Sorry. Can you hear me now? Sorry.
Yeah, perfect. Perfect. Yep.
Okay. I'm squirming in my seat only because there's one really important part of the story. We've always been the straw that stirs the drink. Like, this is not new, right? As my friend Jeff Dixon, who manages Ludacris, likes to say, we're always the oil. We're never the machine. The challenge that we have now is, look, so like Clubhouse is not valued at $4 billion on the backs of white male VCs who are talking about venture capital all day. That platform alone, I watched the entire transition, as you probably did.
Yes.
It happens on the backs of voices who have traditionally not been heard, Black, brown, and
right.
Okay, so first of all, like that moment doesn't happen unless those individuals who are often othered stepped up and actually drove. Even now, like as stupid as it is, like I was like off Clubhouse for a while, and all of a sudden, like the Crenshaw district did a room on Karen Civil, and but by the way, I don't partake in those rooms,
right?
So I'm like, oh, this is really interesting that this is like happening. But like the newest life in Clubhouse is because Black folks, stood up and were like now on there. Now I don't love that content. That's not my favorite kind of content. I'm not doing rooms that are talking about those kinds of things. But I recognize the power that when we show up, it's like Brazilians, by the way. Brazilians have this amazing thing when they show up on social media platforms. They bring an entire world with. I mean, they're the most engaged. We do that across so many things, right? And it's wonderful that we're often the oil. The problem is that we're never the machine.
Right.
So we don't invest in infrastructure, right? We're not building things. And what this Web3 moment, whether you're building a DAO, whether you're building, a community in Discord, we now have an opportunity to be builders. And it's a whole different opportunity. We've always been dope and fresh and talented and cool. And you want us there. Like, I've been the cool kid my whole life. Like, this is not brand new.
Right, exactly.
The difference is I'm now invested in infrastructure. In fact, I recently took, capital, and I actually invested it in, headcount, right? So I have, like, my lawyer, who I would get, like, 30 minutes of time with, maybe every once in a while, now works with me full-time. So all I'm doing all day is talking about securities law with a former securities attorney turned filmmaker, wow. And that's all we nerd out on. And the point is that, like, I could have taken the investment and done a lot of different things, but I knew I needed this person on my team because I know where we're going in this Web3, and it's going to require that I understand the capital markets, not just NFTs, by the way. Where the innovation is happening that we're not talking about, by the way, love tokenization, love the blockchain, but there's innovation happening in Reg A and Reg C.
Yeah.
I won't get too nerdy, but like there's so much happening that in the last 18 months with rolling funds and angel lists and all these things, right? And so we've got to keep our eye on all of these new innovations that are going to. So my point is that understanding and investing in my infrastructure or in your infrastructure, if you're listening to this, is the most critical thing because I can be cool kid all day long. I know I have to think like a 19-year-old girl to be successful in what I do. I know all cool records. I know the spots. I've been a cultural anthropologist my whole life, but like this part of my career at 51 is a rebirth of opportunity driven by the economics of where we are. The economics of where we are, the Robin Hood moment, if you would, right? It's the Robin Hood. It's the rise of the commons. As I once heard in the pandemic. The rise of the commons is about our ability to build infrastructure around the creator economy. We've been the creator economy the whole game. The creators come out of our communities. But again, we've always been the oil, never the machine. And I just came here to disrupt it. No disrespect to CAA, William Morris, record labels, publishing companies. They have all been big infrastructure, big buildings that have held the power. That day is over, my friends. The day where you have to go to a record label to do a deal, or you need this kind of agent. Now, you might still need an agent, yeah. But let me tell you, LeBron James of the future is in his dorm room right now at UCLA. He's a twitcher. He's made $1 million because of the recent NIL rules that allow college athletes to make money. And he's going to build his homeboys into his own version of what LeBron had when LeBron went to the NBA. But they're going to be in their dorm room, and he's going to go one and done, 2 years. He's going to bring his boys with him, and he's going to do it faster than LeBron did it. LeBron took his best friends and had them intern all over the industry. Now, I'm going to go train someone who's in their dorm room at UCLA today, and I'm going to teach them how to actually leverage their empire while they go from being a top AAU basketball player to the NBA in a span of 24 months. That's how fast this is moving, but it's also how fast we need to educate our babies on what's happening in this moment.
Yeah, and this is the best time in history to be alive because of growing up. We both have that whole either you're slinging rock or shooting that jump shot. Now we have the ability to leverage our geekiness, and geeks are chic, nerds are never heard, right? Um, we leverage this intellect, and now this intelligence that we have is an asset because we're able to move differently, and the diversity of options has exponentially grown, especially with the crypto option that we have on the table. And I know for some people it's just like talking about influencers. It's like, crypto, their eyes roll over, like influencers, same type of thing. But I think we have the opportunity, me and you and the people in the space now, and the people that listen to this recording later, have the option to make the change the world forever. For our We don't longer have to succumb to the 9 to 5, right? We have these creator options that allow us to create our own coins, to create our own NFTs, to just to create. Creators will create. And we have a variety of different options, and it's great to hear people like Nas, your homie, be an investor and talk investments, right? Because that was unheard of, right? It was just you made money from music, that was it. Now what? Like 50s making, vitamin water money? Like that kind of opened up the can of worms of like, you did what? What did you do? You didn't really do anything to promote like we've always been doing, because in hip hop, we're all promoters, right? Like my roommate. So when I went to Northeastern, I studied a computer electrical engineer. All my roommates were from New York. Now my roommate is 50 Cent's road manager. So to see that evolve is a beautiful thing, right? And now they're working on the BMF thing and they're doing all kind of shows. But back then, it's just like you just a rapper for a certain amount of time and that's it. Now rappers are becoming TV and movie stars, and people forgot that they used to rap. Like I don't know if people, I mean, other than the Ice Cube movie, I mean the movie, people are like, oh, Ice Cube, you know what I mean, the actor, Will Smith, the actor, as opposed to the rapper. Like it's transitioning and it's working fast. And like you mentioned, we need to really teach the youth, the future generation, that there are options out there, and that cater to their own unique skills, which is very vital. Now, I want to do a quick reset. We're in the last 45 minutes of this podcast, Twitter Spaces podcast. If you have any questions or comments, please hit me in the DMs. My DMs are open. I want to get those addressed. We are recording this, so this is why we're going to go through some filtering there. I really want to kind of leverage all your time. Thank you very much for expanding your schedule and being readily available. I think this information is phenomenal. I love the casual nature as which you mentioned Lady Gaga and DJ Jazzy Jeff. I think it's vital for us to hear that, because there's such a distance between celebrityism and us or the general consumer. You're bridging the gap even in this conversation to give hopefully inspiration to other creators to say, hey, look, difference. If you want to connect with these people, bring something to the table, keep with your craft, and you're basically 1 degree away, because if they connect with you, you connected with them. They just have to have some offer that's readily available that makes sense. And no longer do we have to go through a lot of gatekeepers, right? Social has allowed that ability for us to get directly to the source. And this social platform, the ability for us to speak and hear each other's voices, we get a sense of who we are with a very short period of time. So again, if you have any questions, comments that you want to make, please hit me up in my DMs. My DMs are open, and we'll get them addressed. So we talked about the origin story. We talked about that.
I'm good till 1:45 too. By the way.
Okay, great. So
I'm
that's
good for another 30. Yeah.
okay, good. Another half hour, which is fantastic. So in the last half hour, I really want to just focus about the future, because we talked about the past, the current, and the future. So we talked a little bit about crypto, and you're doing some stuff in investments. Where do you recommend for creators to really start researching and dedicating more time to prepare and to be not left behind? What would your recommendation be? Um, knowing what you know.
Yeah. So in full transparency, I'm super late, and I look at it as the blockchain. I think the cryptocurrencies are a function and a tool, an instrument of the blockchain. But I'm I think the blockchain is here. It's sort of It's not going anywhere. Full transparency, I was super late to the world. For me, I think what I was trying to solve for is I seemingly have a great network. I remember meeting this guy named Travis, who started a company called Uber before it started, and
right.
Neil, who started a company called Warby Parker. I was in this community called Summit Series, and I never really positioned myself as an investor, but I was friendly with all of them, and I started to see folks get into some of these deals through allocations. And one of the calculations I made by moving to LA 5 years ago was how to leverage my access and my social capital as a value proposition, as a value lever to get into deals. So, to be on cap tables. So when I first moved here, the articulation of that was a traditional 2 and 20 venture fund. And I, certainly that was why I moved to LA. Yeah, I'm gonna go home. Sorry, I'm gonna do this from home. Sorry.
No worries. So before you go on, could you, for those people that don't know, what is a 2 and 20 venture fund?
Sorry. So there's a venture fund. I won't go too deep into this, but a venture fund allows you to invest money from what are called LPs, who are investors in your fund, and then you take the whole fund takes what's called a carry, and that carry is known as the 20 part of the 2 and 20. The 2% is like a management fee. It's traditional sort of management fee that I would essentially take from managing the fund.
Okay.
And so I was. So I thought that like having this access to culture, having this access to influential people, that the best reflection of that would be a venture fund. So I spent the last 4 years like learning, self-taught about
losing you. We're losing you. We're losing you. Let's see what happens here. We're still losing you. And as we wait for him to get connected, okay.
I'll be home in 2 seconds.
All right.
Hold on. I'll be home in 2 seconds. Okay, is that better?
Yes, much better. Thank
Hello?
you. Yes.
Hello?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Sorry.
Perfect.
I live in the mountainous region.
Okay, no worries.
Okay, yes, I can hear you. All right. So anyway, the venture fund is a vehicle that there's many vehicles, right? There's many ways that you can invest in companies. And me not having a finance background and moving to LA and the idea of starting a fund with my partner, who's pretty influential, I thought that was one articulation of how you invest. And so I started doing angel investments, which all of these things require that you position yourself, and that you demonstrate value. Because at the end of the day, the good deals, the deals that I wanted to be in, they say a lot of no's to capital. So they're like, no, we don't want your money. We're good. No, you over there, Mr. James, we want your money, because it's not just the money, it's actually what's called smart capital. And so I built the last 4 years around this idea of being probably never going to be the biggest check on the cap table, but I'm going to be one of the most influential checks on the cap table, because I have a network, I have brand experience, I run an agency, and so I partnered with my business partner. His name is Will Campbell. He owns an advertising agency, black owned, in LA, to build a fund. And so what we're really excited about is the moment that we sit in right now, and so I just want to double tap on this idea of the creator economy. We see the creator economy as the future of work, and so the way that we're articulating the creator moment, and I love that you kind of use that analogy. I worked on Nike, my biggest client when I owned my agency, and there's a line that is used in the Nike business, which is an old Bowerman quote. Bowerman is one of the founders of Nike, and it says, "If you have a body, you're an athlete." So we've actually grown that to say, if you have an imagination, you're a creator. And so that really opens up the opportunity for those who have previously not seen themselves as creators to now see themselves as creators. And we believe that the creator, right, is not just the TikTok creator of the past. It's the dentist who's on TikTok and talking about flossing.
Right, right.
It's essentially like everybody, if you have an imagination, has the potential to be a creator. So we're taking a big swing at this creator economy moment because we see it as the future of work, and we see them as creatorpreneurs, and we see them as. It's funny. It's the same way that I saw my artists at Columbia Records, by the way.
Right.
I never saw them as just like a record sale or a radio play. I saw Lauryn Hill as a brand.
Right.
I saw them as entrepreneurs. And so my job was to manage creators who, sold records. But I was taking them to Simon & Schuster and the NBA and Nike, and I was trying to facilitate partnerships for my artists. And I was doing all that because I was like, these people are entrepreneurs. And by the way the system works in the record business is you only get to spend money in cycle. So there's like 9 months of budget you get. But I was like, wait a minute, Lauryn Hill's famous all year round. Why are we just focusing on just the 9 months or whatever that the record's in the market? And I just believe that we're in that same moment right now that we should look at folks through the lens of creativity and entrepreneurship. And so, so we're taking a big swing. We are raising a fund. We're going to end up doing what's called a rolling fund. You can Google this and research this. There's only about 15 of them that exist. And they essentially allow us to bring in accredited investors on a quarterly basis. It's almost like Netflix for venture. And it sort of uses the angel list framework, and we are preparing a new fund, a new rolling fund, and it's great because it allows me to leverage my network and what are called there's unaccredited investors and there's accredited investors, and so I have a lot of high net worths, a lot of accredited investors in my network. But with 2.4 million followers on Clubhouse, I also have a whole bunch of unaccredited investors. And so I've been really fascinated by Reg CF, which is a crowdfunding policy that opens up the ability for you and me to start a company today and for us to raise up to $5 million capital from unaccredited investors. And the reason that's important is you give me 1,000 fans, followers, members of the community, and $3 million, I could build anything. You know what I mean? And so there's a certain celebrity, I can't say who, that we're building a dog pet food and accessories business around. This person is a very big celebrity, and we're going to open it up to the public and allow the fans to be able to have equity, not Kickstarter, where you get a signed autograph. You'll have equity in this celebrity's business and have the opportunity. And to your point, I traverse in traffic in the world of celebrities, and it is the positioning that matters, right? It is the moment of like saying, okay, I see you as I worked with Kanye for 6 months. I worked on Sunday service, in the middle of Sunday service growing up. And I didn't know Kanye in the record business at all. And I ended up meeting him because he wanted to invest in one of the companies I was advising. They're called Boosted Boards. They had a skateboard that went 25 miles an hour, so a remote control skateboard. And Kanye and wanted to meet with the CEO. These are 4 super nerdy robotics. They were like, oh my God, Kanye West wants to meet with us. So I was like, great, let's go. So we ended up going to Calabasas. Now, I purposely didn't go into my background with Kanye because I didn't want Kanye to be like, oh, you're a record industry guy.
Right.
Yeah, I worked at Columbia Records. No, he actually assumed that I was just an investor in the mobility space.
Nice.
So what happened is he just started sending me all these mobility deals. And for 6 months, it was wonderful. It was amazing. I'd read scripture, and then I'd talk about mobility projects with Kanye West. And it was an incredible moment of seeing Sunday service. But the point is that I was positioned to have that opportunity with Kanye because he saw me bringing something very different than most of the people that were coming around him. And whatever, he rotated through. There's a lot of people in the Kanye West world. But for the moment that we were, hacking on this potential idea that we worked on together, I recognized that, at this point, Kanye's like Michael Jackson level. I don't think I've worked with Jane Fonda. That's probably his biggest hit. I've never worked with somebody like this big, right? We did $1.2 million. He did $1.2 million in hoodies.
Yeah.
At Coachella on Easter. This was at Easter. This was just like an Easter drop, like Jesus hoodies.
Yeah.
And I was like, I've never been with anybody this creative, this influential, and it was fascinating. I think I write a blog post about it. It was absolutely fascinating. And for me, the opportunity was, hey Kanye, let's not just like sell hoodies or even sing songs about Jesus Christ, but what if we actually, when we go into cities, actually unlock potential and opportunities in Newark, in Detroit, in Boston, right? So we go, so I had this grand vision. Even though it didn't work, I ultimately, it's not something that we are building right now. It gave me a newfound respect for the power of influence and culture and how that opens up capital markets, opens up capital in general, and how to leverage fame as a lever of capital power, cultural power, and creativity. And, and so that's what we're doing now. Honestly, we are at the intersection of venture capital, brand, and culture. And pretty agnostic as investors. We are not afraid of the blockchain, NFTs, and crypto. We are not just building a traditional venture fund. We're doing a rolling fund. And we are constantly studying new regulations that have been passed there's a thing called a Series LLC, which has been traditionally used in real estate, that we're sort of porting over and thinking about that in the collectible space. So it's great. Again, having my lawyer full time, it's like all I'm doing all day long is like nerding out on like new innovations and ways in which the culture can participate in new ways.
Wow, it's powerful stuff, and I think that the lessons for the creator here are very vital. Is there's a lot of opportunities out there, and the essence of this conversation is that, again, stick to the craft, understand the history. Once you have an understanding of the history, you dedicate yourself to the craft, that this is going to open up doors that you wouldn't have imagined. um, and even the code switching allowed you to that you learned early on in your career, is now you're still applying it with the Kanyes of the world, is so that you could adapt to who you need to be for the person that you're dealing with or communicating with, which is very vital. Um, so as we wrap this up, because I know you have an additional like 15 minutes, and again, I appreciate all your time. What would you say? There was a question that came about in regards to recognitions and awards, and acknowledging, then this new era. We know about the Emmys and the Oscars and things like that. Do you see or think that could be some sort of award for like a Creator of the Year award or something like that in the future? What are your thoughts on
I'm such the wrong person to ask questions because I don't give I'm not gonna curse. I don't give a lot of I don't care about accolades a lot, and I think that in the industry, I'm a little jaded because so much of your work. Like I worked on the Grammy Awards for 3 seasons, by the way. So like I know too much, and I feel like we need to do the work outside of Golden Globes and recognition, and I find that especially in the Black community, and even recently, in light of George Floyd, there's a lot of folks that have been given spotlight, right? And I think it's great. I think spotlight is helpful in illumination. I think it's really important. But I just think like the awards that we need to do is like how many checks are how many employees are you hiring? You know what I mean? Like how many families are you feeding with your creator economy business? Like how many communities are being transformed in communities that need transforming? I just feel like I'm so much more focused on those kinds of things, and I find that we spend a lot of time in conferences and awards and things, and like I'm about this action in the great words of the poet Marshawn Lynch. I'm about that action.
Exactly.
So I don't really get into like the. In fact, one time, this is kind of crazy. When you work in the music industry, one of the hallmarks of working in the music industry is you get these plaques, these gold and platinum. I had like lots of them, like Fuji's, and Destiny's Child, blah blah blah. And I was moving offices, and they were all in the backseat of my car, and my car ended up being stolen.
Wow.
So all my plaques, with made out to James Andrews. Someone's running around Atlanta right now with a Fuji's plaque that says James Andrews. I don't know what they're doing with it. But there was this moment where I went, oh my gosh, all the recognition, all the accolades, and I was like, you know what? The people who know me, and it's like me and this guy named No ID. He's a famous hip hop producer.
Oh, right, yeah.
We used to say like, but were you really in the room? Those of us that were in the room know who was in the room. It was a very small room. You know what I mean? So when I'm on Clubhouse, sometimes I hear people like telling stories, and I'm like, you weren't there. Like you weren't in the room that made it happen.
Right.
And I tend to live, sort of pattern matching Clarence Avant, who is the most amazing guy because he's definitely like on a need to know basis.
Right.
I tend to love the people who are on a need to know basis. One time, Puffy was DJing a party, and Clarence Avant walked in, and he's DJing, and he goes, "Yo, that's my nigga Clarence Avant." And Clarence Avant walked up to the DJ booth. This is a famous story he tells me. Mm-hmm. And he pulled him aside and he said, "Son, I'm Clarence Avant. I don't do shout outs." And that's how I roll. Like, I'm definitely like, I don't need shout outs. So anyway, I say that to say, I find that we prioritize and spend a lot of time in these things that are like, I want the recognition. No, do the work. The recognition will come by the impact you create. Have a goal, change communities, change people's lives, and then sure, give us some recognition.
Perfect. I love it. Going to go a little bit faster with the questions and things like that. So
I'll go faster with the answers.
Yeah. So Startup Engine, you must be familiar with that, yes?
That's the like a Y Combinator type thing?
That is essentially the Kickstarter for startups where people own equity into it. And so I met up with Isaac Cases the third because he has fan base. And that seems like it's a great platform, similar to what you were talking about before. Instead of just doing the Kickstarter thing and whatever, you get equity into the company and you get percentages and you get some stock. So that seems to be like a great direction to be heading into. One question that's often always like a key question to ask someone that's established and someone that's doing a lot of things like yourself: what would you tell your younger self, and what would you do differently if you were to do something differently?
Younger self, pick up more languages. Mm-hmm. Spend more time outside of America earlier. Let's see. I would, I've made financial mistakes across my career, made money, mm-hmm. lost money, made money, lost money. So certainly probably, my grandfather was an accountant, God rest his soul, probably rolls over in his grave every time he looks at my taxes. There's certainly like those tactical things, learn more about tax law probably, or like tax, like how wealth is created, but by, understanding, more policies and more laws. I know these are like my younger self. I'm not like you're really going to tell a 10-year-old these things. It sounds quite boring, but I guess, I would tell my younger self that, you're gonna get hurt. You're gonna fall in love. Someone's gonna break up with you, and it's gonna be painful. You're gonna get screwed over in a business deal. Someone you trusted is gonna screw you over, and you have to, even though that will happen, mm-hmm. You have to govern and manage your ethics in a way that that your reputation is always intact. And, and I strive for that. Am I perfect? Probably not. But I've been screwed over by people who seem to, sometimes make it in life. Where you work in the music business, it's like swimming with sharks. Right? Yeah. You don't come hunting for rabbit in the music business, it's snakes. It's you got to understand what you're in that shark pit. So yeah, I think a lot of the emotional parts of the business. I think have been, to understand that people disappoint you and people sometimes aren't who they say they are. And that happens.
How do you prevent someone like, so it's just hit or miss. You just have to roll with the punches and make those adjustments. And, you're going to just kind of built into your investment portfolio of people that there's going to be some duds that are not going to give you a ROI on that investment in the relationship.
I'm a better investor and business person because of the people who screw me over.
Right, because you're always thinking about this stuff.
No, not even thinking about it. No. It's actually like, it's I have a detection. I have
BS
a
meter.
fraud detection. I have a fraud detection unit built into much faster and much crisper now. And I know what questions to ask. And
Nice.
it's not that I'm always thinking about the people who screwed me over. I give them very little time in my cognitive hard drive. I actually know what questions I should have asked in those situations that I now ask so that I can qualify my time.
What would be that question that we could use if there's anything?
Mm-hmm.
What would be a good generic question that we as creators should ask when we're going in, we're looking for a partnership and things like that that you've learned to that you've neglected to ask in the past?
And sometimes it's a question and sometimes it's a feeling. I don't want to get overly spiritual, but
Right.
I've learned to I'm a practicing meditator. I'm someone who can read the room, not to get all woo woo. I know I live in
Right.
LA.
Right.
I can read energy in ways I couldn't read before. And sometimes it's an acknowledgement of that energy. There's something about, by the way, intuition is described as a female in the Bible, and women have the best intuition, and I am envious of their ability to tap into that intuition. And I think that I've become better at trusting my intuition because I've been able to become a better listener. But yeah, sometimes it's a question of character, right? Like watching how somebody treats the waiter that
Right. Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's sometimes it's like a hitman or a mobster. I'm always like watching little details. It's working at Sony Music. I'll never forget. Like it was literally like working in the mafia. It's like where you sat in the meeting dictated where you were in the power structure, and I think it's the little things. But I mean, certainly I'll ask questions sometimes that just tell me who you are as a human. And guess what? Do I want to be in business with you every day? Because when you invest in companies, you're investing in people.
Exactly.
And when we invest in companies, we're only getting in because they know we're going to be what's called a strategic investor. Which guess what that means? It means that you're helping that founder, accelerate growth. So that means I'm basically going in. I just left a meeting with a guy right now who created Comic-Con, by the way. He's amazing. And we're doing something with the founder of Comic-Con. And I like him. His name is Gareb Shamus. And like, I just like Gareb. He's taught me so much about collectibles and comics and, and the business of the comic book world. And we're both dads of kids the same age. And I want to be in business with him. And I think we're going to make a bunch of money, but that's not the driver of the deal. I see money deals all the time. I want to be in business with Gareb because I think he's
right. Right, exactly. And for those people that are interested in asking a question or comment, please, my DMs are open. Send them to me first. This is a recorded Twitter Space podcast, so I just want to be sensitive to that. So if you have a question and you want to ask, send me a DM. We'll get it through. And if it needs clarification, we'll bring you up to the microphone. It's necessary. We only have a few minutes here. Anything that I should have asked you?
I'll do 150.
Oh, fantastic. So is there a question that I should have asked that you feel that people don't ask enough of you from your experience?
Oh man, that's great. Let me tell you, you've done a great job, man. I do this a lot, and you certainly prepared for this interview, and you know your world, and you know the context in which I'm building in, which is the creator economy. I don't know, like I am a multi hyphenate. I'm DJing right now in Clubhouse because I really love the idea of not being known for one thing. As much as I can sit on your stage and talk about the intricacies of new securities policies, I can also talk about De La Soul's last few records or Tribe Called Quest. And so I love that. I have varied interests, and much like the generation behind us, like I don't want to be known for you're the guy who did social media. You're the guy.
Right.
I like being kind of in many different worlds, and I don't know if there's necessarily a question, but I did want to kind of make that statement that in many ways, when you came out of college, going into entrepreneurship was for people who they thought couldn't get jobs, right? Oh, you're an entrepreneur, that means you can't get a job. I've always respected entrepreneurship. My grandfather came to this country, built his own accounting practice. My aunt, who I lived with in Palo Alto, built her own version of an advertising agency in the 80s. And so I lived with her and her lover, by the way. I lived with two amazing women who showed me what it meant to build a business in community and being in the LGBT community. Then for her as a gay woman in Palo Alto, I learned a lot about not just building a business, but the power of your network. And your network is your net worth.
Right.
So yeah, like I've had good home training, I guess, to kind of get to this point. But yeah, I don't know. I think you've done a great job.
Oh, I appreciate it very much. Now, as a multi-achiever, what would you say? Multi-achiever. And what would you say that your biggest challenge is? What would you say is if you could get some assistance by someone that is catering to a multi-achiever, what would you say that would be?
It was until this year, really supporting the operations. I'm a flywheel of opportunities. I live, the authenticated. I always say is, we have from rappers to royalty, and we have a couple princesses. We have some rappers. We have I move around the world, and so therefore, because I'm super open. I see a lot of opportunity, not just even investment opportunities, whether it's just leaving lunch and someone's like, hey, come to Davos with us and do this event. And it could be that. It could be, hey, we're going to Mexico next because there's this land and they're going to start planting. And, it'd be great for you because, you could probably help us think about telling the story around planting as a crop. I'm kind of joking, but not joking.
Yeah.
So I see all these opportunities. And what I didn't have before, it's almost like an ice cream store. I didn't really have a team behind me that could evaluate the opportunities on a really fast level. Because we've got to say yes, no really quickly. And we don't, we're just raising our first fund. We don't have a ton of capital we're deploying right now. And so, there's what are called opportunity costs. Every meeting I take, every sit down, every phone call, even this right here is an opportunity cost. And, I have to evaluate those, fairly closely. And I did not before. I was, taking lots of meetings and doing meetings. And, the pandemic really helped me understand that, I don't need to do all the meetings I used to do.
Right.
They can be Zoom calls. And I can get a lot done in one clubhouse room. I can, that's kind of, I can get a lot more done now through these tools. So I don't know. For me, we certainly are, I want to have smart people around me, so I'm always looking for folks who are building, especially in the creator economy, who are building the virtual real estate businesses, the blockchain businesses, the metaverse business, VR, AR. I'm definitely leaning in a lot heavier into the architects of those worlds, not just the creators, but the folks who are building the infrastructure.
Right.
Also folks that understand policy. So, folks who are really smart, lawyers who understand, lawyers who are representing people who are building DAOs, who play in that space, who play in decentralized. Certainly that's my current need that I'm trying to fulfill. And then the last part would just be talent. I'm in communities, I'm in education, I'm on boards here in LA, so I'm looking for those 12 to 18-year-olds who are, want to build the next businesses, because for me, that's the generation that I'm looking for. In Israel, where I spent a significant amount of time, they have the IDF, and the IDF has a unit called the 8200 unit. And the 8200 unit is the premier unit that you serve in, because where you serve matters when you're in Israel. It's like what college did you go to?
Right.
Anybody who's worked in technology that you probably worked with that comes from Israel has probably served in Unit 8200. There's a book called Startup Nation that chronicles the importance of Israel's, how Israel became a powerhouse through this unit called the 8200 unit. What's interesting about this, I went to Israel with the guy who wrote the book Startup Nation, and what's interesting about the 8200 unit is they identify these kids at 12 and 13. They know at 12 and 13 you are Unit 8200 worthy. And I thought about the U.S. We do the same thing. If you're 6'4" and you dunk on somebody, right, or you catch a football, We pluck you out of the system. We put you into AAU basketball,
Right.
and then we fast track you to Duke or Michigan, right? And then you become part of a unit.
Right.
And I said to myself, what if I took really smart kids who are like right now building Fortnite communities in Twitch, or building Minecraft communities or Roblox and Discord? Those are the skill sets of the future. And what if I could find those people between the ages of 12 and 18? My nephew in Philadelphia is 12 years old. He runs an entire Discord server of Oakland Raider fans.
Wow.
Do you know how valuable that skill set's going to be in the future? They're going to say, oh, he does something? Yeah, at 12, I managed my own community on Discord.
Crazy.
That's who I'm looking for right now. And so we started to I mentor about 20 to 25-year-olds with one prerequisite that they started businesses when they were 18, 12 to 18.
Wow.
And you'd be surprised how many people have done slime businesses and, Minecraft servers and stuff like that. I'm upset. Those are my AAU players. Those are my rock stars of the future. And I'm constantly playing, a game of organizing them and bringing them into our conversations and bringing them into our community, bringing them into the authenticated community. We used to do a Gen Z show on Clubhouse. I have a young woman that I mentor named Maxine Marcus, and she has a company called Ambasco. She started in high school, and she runs it out of her dorm room at USC. And she basically does Gen Z research. She's been doing. Her father is a very famous venture capitalist has a fund with Jay-Z called the Marcy Fund. And he said, "Hey, my daughter's coming to USC. Take her to lunch or something." Right. So I took her to Soho House, like Uncle James, and I sat across from her. This is right before she moved into the dorms. I literally felt like I was sitting across from a venture capitalist. And she was schooling me at 18, and I was like, "Oh, I'm keeping you." I've been mentoring her for 3 years, and she's just incredible. So we were doing a Gen Z show on Clubhouse, where I got to meet all these fantastic Gen Z founders on Clubhouse. But yeah, I'm always looking for interesting people. I'm always looking for a bar mitzvah or a party to DJ.
Where do you congregate? Where do multi-achievers like yourself get together? And I mean, it's obviously the Clubhouse that you're building and things like that. Is there a need for a community of multi-achievers to kind of collaborate, commiserate together? Do you see that to be something that you would be a part of?
Well, I have it. That's what authenticated is. So again, Clubhouse is my outside of my ring. It's where we build audience. But I have about 350 people in private groups that we chat and talk and build in. I use community text messaging, so people can text me 415-843-8100. Shameless plug. If you text me DJ, you'll find out when I DJ. If you text me Clubhouse, you'll find out when I'm getting talks in Clubhouse. So I'm organizing in the back end the cues and the layers of community building, and that's where we organize. And then I do dinners in real life, so I'll pop up and do a 8 to 12 person dinner. If I come to your city in Boston, I'll boom, and then I'll gather 12 or 15 people. I'm constantly bringing together folks. And in my network, and Clubhouse is a great place to, when I want to do it in front of thousands. But the magic for me is 8 to 12 people, really small, really intimate, and that's where the magic happens for me. That's where I do my best work.
So just because I know you have to go, the best place for people to connect with you is to sign up to your community.
It's invite only.
Okay.
So there's no sign up per se. But we certainly are going to open up a new batch. We're kind of retinkering our community to meet the needs of what we see in the community. One of those needs is to help people become a few things. One, become better investors. So we have a whole track where we're teaching, first-time investors, angel investors, high net worth individuals, and then showing them our deals and showing them what we invest in. And then the other thing that, I spend a lot of time in is a caretaker of someone with mental health issues, as somebody who is just, I'm in this sort of know thyself moment. We're doing things on death. We're doing things on sex. I have a whole show on Clubhouse on sexual wellness where we talk. I invested in a sexual wellness company called Comma. And so we very freely for 2 hours talk about masturbation and sex and pleasure and love. And so I have a group of people where we're, talking about sexual wellness. I have another group of people where we're talking about time and our relationship to time. So we do all this in the back end, and we're opening up a new batch to bring folks in. But certainly, if you text me, if you follow me on social, again, those are kind of the layers there. But but we're going to get less Larry in the fall. We have a whole content calendar, and I do stuff in Topia, so I often leave Clubhouse and bring my folks to Topia. If you go to topia.io/the authenticated, you'll see our space there. I think it's open. I think the door is open. Topia.io/the authenticated, which is sort of like an avatar-based community. So think Clubhouse meets like spatial web.
Oh, I see.
And so we gather there, and we're going to be doing a lot of gathering there. And then I DJ. I've been DJing probably every other day on Clubhouse, and just really having a lot of fun doing it.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, so I found the link. I'll share that a little later. So will there be like a authenticated Boston, New York, Florida, or do you think it's just the LA is the thing and everything's revolving?
No. Before this, I was planes, trains, and automobiles, and I was doing the authentic. We built a tour called Culture and Code, where we took founders and investors all around different cities, and we specifically focused on cities that were not Palo Alto, not Austin, not New York. I'm mildly obsessed with markets like Detroit and Chattanooga, Tennessee, which has the fastest Wi-Fi in the country, and Miami, which has an incredible. Before people were moving to Miami, I was doing a lot in Miami as well. I am pre-pandemic. I am the person who would bring in an NBA player, an investor, a founder, and I would do these dinners. And we did this Culture and Code was like a 72-hour experience. Our community got to ask questions. How do I invest? What's diluted stock look like? We built kind of this gathering that lasted 72 hours, and people would fly in for it. We did Detroit with Dan Gilbert, who's put $5 billion to work in downtown Detroit. We did Miami with the Knight Foundation. Usher was involved in that one, I think. And so I think for me, it's doing more of that. So I'll probably come. We're doing Miami, New York, probably before the year's up, and then we'll probably. The Middle East is you probably don't have time to get into that today, but the Middle East is a place that I've done a lot of work in, and a lot of our members are spread out between the UAE and other parts of the Middle East. Another place I'm passionate about is South America, and so Brazil and South America has always been a place that I've spent a lot of time in. All I've done on Clubhouse is just 10x my relationships in all those places where I already had traction. And so I've been hosting dinners, if you would, in the metaverse, in my own metaverse of sorts. I look at what I'm doing as like V1 of the metaverse. The metaverse isn't just VR and AR. It's like organizing communities and moving them around from Topia to the Clubhouse to some of these spaces. And so certainly version 1 is starting now. I'm going to get a lot more serious about this quarter.
Well, that's phenomenal. I know that you over-delivered. We greatly appreciate it. For those people that enjoyed this particular discussion, please put up the 100s. Please acknowledge James for essentially making time for us. He's went way beyond what I expected. A lot of information to digest. For those people that came in late or came in and missed a certain portion, as soon as this is done, the entire recording is going to be available. I'm actually going to put that recording right now to the pin that to the nest so that people can easily find it because I've already tweeted it out. So hold on just a second. So if you go to the hashtag Monetize Monday, you're going to see the actual recording there. I'll pin it to the nest. Yeah, I don't mess around. So yeah, so hold on just a second.
You made me a Twitter Spaces fan, by the way.
Yes.
This is really good. I get it. I see why you're here.
So now if you go to that last pinned tweet, the entire recording is going to be readily available. You can listen to it, take notes. There's a lot of things that we'll discuss. Sorry that I didn't get to everyone's questions. We were, trying to capture as much as possible. That's why I always leave my DMs open. So if you have any questions, please tweet them out. And I'm sure that whenever James gets a chance, he'll share the knowledge via the tweet. So it's phenomenal. And yeah, so yeah, if you look at that so actually, hold on just a second. I think I just sent out a tweet with this information. Let me just see real quick. Boom, boom, boom. Because I put your information, blah, blah, blah. Okay, yeah. So if you go to this tweet that I just pinned to the top, it has the Topia link. and his phone number, and text them the message. Is there a particular keyword that you use that you recommend when they text you?
Yeah, just I would text authentic clubhouse or authenticated.
Or how about like Monetize Monday? Is that good?
Yeah, let me set up a queue. I'll set up. Yeah, do Monetize Monday. That's fine. I'll set up a queue.
Cool. So as soon as give them some time to get that established.
Yeah, exactly.
When you're all set, just respond to the tweet that's there, and get it going. Again, I really appreciate you making so much time.
No, thank you, man. I'm glad that we got this done. What you're doing is amazing. Please count me in as support for all you're doing. Would love to have you on our show as well. We do a Wednesday AM show in Clubhouse. I will entertain coming to Twitter Spaces and doing that. I love. Well, now the Clubhouse has recording. I guess they have equal tools. I guess I don't know, but I certainly have a lot. I have a lot of followers there, so
right.
I need to go ahead and use it. But I'd love to get some more tips from you on Twitter Spaces.
Yeah,
this has been a great way to kind of really experience the platform. You are a phenomenal interviewer, my friend.
Thank you,
dude. You're good, man. I mean, like I said, I used to do Don Lemon on CNN. I've done it all, and this is you've done a great job of like asking the right questions and just being present and leaving space and listening and reacting and then also knowing contextually where we are in the world. And I just appreciate it. Really makes me feel good when like people actually like are prepared for an interview, because it really shows me that you care about the content you're delivering, and that shows. So thank you so much.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love digging into the crates like we did back in the records and finding that freaking hook from James Brown and then flipping it and making pretend like, oh, that there's an art form to that. And I think the interview is just like that. And then letting it breathe. What does the crowd want? What do they, because you can't be rushing songs, right? You got to slow it down, speed it up. You got a whole thing. And again, I really appreciate it. I look forward to actually collaborating with you, working with you in the future. I think there's a lot of potential here. So again, thank you everyone that showed up. Let me look at some of the analytics. The analytics are telling me now that we had about 221 people total, 46 max listeners, when an hour and 52 minutes. But again, because it's recording, we're gonna have a lot of people on the replay instantly. So that's a whole nother level of connectivity.
Yes.
So
let me know how that goes, and I'll share it as well. And thank you so much for this. This is great. And mucho gusto.
Yes, un placer, mi amigo. So vamos a ver. Thank you very much. Again, this was Monetize Monday. My name is Jose Limane, 3 to 5 Eastern Time. I talk to creators, I talk to influencers, I talk to founders, just like James that was here. And, I'm glad you guys enjoyed this. This was a phenomenal experience for me. I hope you just enjoyed it. If you like it, retweet it, send out your comments, sit me in the DMs if you feel that I can improve. I know I didn't get to all your questions. I apologize for that. Hit my DMs. That's the best way to reach me when this happens. So I'm going to leave it at that. We're going to officially end exactly at 5 p.m. Actually 5:01 now. But if you enjoyed it, let me know how I can improve. Who you want to see as a guest, anyone in the world. I'll make it happen and see what, it all depends on their schedule. So have a phenomenal day. I wish everyone the most success possible. And I'm going to end this in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Have a fantastic day, all. Ciao for now.